Have you ever found yourself in a situation that felt ordinary at first, only to spiral into something you couldn't explain? Tonight, we'll dive into two true stories that will make you think twice about who you trust and what might be hiding on the roads you travel. These aren't ghost tales or urban legends. They're chilling accounts from people who lived through them and never saw the world the same way again. Watch until the end and tell me in the comments what you would have done. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. Story 1. Lake House in Pennsylvania last summer. I was invited by one of my closest friends to celebrate his birthday at a bar by the lake in Pennsylvania. It wasn't just any bar, but one of those places everyone in town seemed to know about. The kind of spot where the music was loud, the drinks came fast, and the atmosphere made you forget about everything else. We arrived just as the sun was setting over the water, and the reflections on the lake made the whole place look almost cinematic. At first, everything felt normal. We laughed, we ordered a few rounds, and the night carried on the way nights like that usually do. But somewhere around midnight, things took a turn. That was when two women approached our group. They introduced themselves as art students, dressed in a way that suggested money, or at least a certain kind of privilege, time 00.95s, expensive shoes, manicured nails, and a confidence that didn't match the kind of people who usually hung around that bar. They weren't loud or reckless like the rest of the crowd. They carried themselves with this strange composure that immediately set them apart. Naturally, we were curious. They seemed genuinely interested in us, asking where we were from, what we were celebrating, time so six, even joking that we should keep the party going somewhere more private. That's when one of them casually mentioned that her family owned a lake house nearby. She said it was only a short drive away and that it would be a better place to relax than staying cramped in the noisy bar. I'll admit, at first, it sounded almost too good to be true. Who just invites strangers to their family's property in the middle of the night? Still, the way she said it was convincing enough, and with the alcohol already in our system, none of us thought too hard about it. My friend seemed excited, and I wasn't about to be the one to ruin the vibe. So we agreed. When we got to the house, I remember being impressed. It sat right on the edge of the lake, the kind of place you'd imagine in a real estate magazine, time 0.95s. Clean lines, big glass windows, and a wide deck overlooking the water. We slipped off our shoes and followed the women into what looked like a living room, though the word living room hardly did it justice. It felt like walking into a gallery, minimal furniture, abstract art on the walls, everything curated down to the smallest detail. That's when things started to feel off. One of the women handed me a glass of orange juice, insisting that I must be thirsty after the ride. It struck me as strange. Why not a beer or something stronger? But I was too caught up in the moment to question it. I took a sip, and within minutes, something in my body began to change. It wasn't the usual dizziness from alcohol. This was heavier, more invasive. My limbs felt weak, as if my own weight was pressing me down into the floor. My chest tightened, my vision blurred, and every step felt like I was walking through water. The last thing I remember is trying to speak, but realizing the words wouldn't come out the way I wanted. My body no longer listened to me. My friend's laughter echoed faintly from another room, but it felt distant, like I was already drifting somewhere else. And then, just like a switch had been flipped, everything went dark. When I finally opened my eyes, the first thing I felt was the sting of cold air against my skin. My head pounded, the kind of dull, throbbing pain you get after surgery or anesthesia, not a simple hangover. I tried to move, but for a few seconds, my body refused to obey me. It was only when my eyes adjusted that I realized something was terribly wrong. The room I was lying in was completely bare. 4 blank walls, a cracked ceiling, time 12.65 as, and a single window covered with rusted bars. The glass was filthy, and beyond it, I could only make out the faint outline of trees swaying in the wind. The door had no handle on the inside. Whoever put me here didn't plan on me leaving anytime soon. That's when I noticed something even stranger. I wasn't wearing the same clothes I had on the night before. My shirt and jeans were gone, replaced by an oversized hoodie and sweatpants that didn't belong to me. I reached instinctively for my pockets, but they were empty. My wallet, my keys, my phone, every trace of my life, gone. The realization hit me like a bucket of ice water. Whoever had drugged me, whoever had brought me here, had stripped away everything that tied me back to who I was. Just as panic began to set in, I heard a groan from the corner of the room. My friend was there, slumped against the wall, his face pale and confused. He looked at me with the same disoriented fear I must have shown him. "What the hell happened?" he muttered, his voice hoarse. I didn't have an answer. Like me, he had no memory of how we got there. The last thing he remembered was stepping into that beautiful lake house and laughing with the other girl. After that, nothing but black. For several minutes, we sat in silence, trying to gather our thoughts. The more I replayed it in my mind, the less sense it made. Why go through all this trouble just to leave us alive in an empty room? Why take our clothes, our belongings, but not harm us in any obvious way? The questions only deepened my unease. Eventually, survival instincts kicked in. We began testing the door, pushing against it with our shoulders. At first, it didn't budge. But desperation has a way of giving you strength. After repeated shoves, the old frame cracked, and we forced it open just enough to slip through. What waited outside nearly froze me in place. This was not the luxurious lake house we had been led to believe in. It wasn't even close. Instead, we stumbled into the hallway of an abandoned building, the walls covered in peeling paint, the air thick with mold. Broken furniture was scattered around, and the floorboards creaked beneath our feet. We hurried down the corridor, searching for an exit, every step echoing in the emptiness. When we finally pushed through a side door, the truth was undeniable. We weren't at some family property by the lake. We were standing outside of a decaying house deep in the woods, its windows shattered, its porch collapsing under years of neglect. It was the kind of place local kids would dare each other to explore on Halloween, not somewhere you'd willingly walk into on your own time, .95s. The eerie silence of the forest made the whole scene even more surreal. My stomach turned as the realization sank in. We had been lured here under false pretenses, and whoever did it had gone through elaborate steps to make sure we never knew why. We didn't wait around. We ran, stumbling through the trees until we finally reached a rural road. Hours later, after flagging down a passing car and convincing the driver we weren't crazy, we ended up at the nearest police station. That should have been the moment of relief, but it wasn't. The officers listened at first, nodding politely as we described what happened. But the longer we spoke, the more their expressions shifted. To them, 2 young men drinking too much, blacking out, and ending up in the wrong place wasn't exactly headline material. They suggested maybe we had wandered off drunk, maybe misremembered the details. When we insisted about the clothes, the locked room, the missing belongings, they wrote it down, but with a look that told me they didn't buy it. In the end, all we got was a brief report and a dismissive warning to be careful next time. No investigation, no search of the house, nothing. It was as if our story ended there, neatly folded into the category of youthful mistakes. But for me, it didn't end. Not really. Even now, I can't shake the feeling that something much darker was at play. Someone chose that house. Someone decided to drug us, strip us of our identities, and leave us there. And the most haunting part is the silence. The fact that we may never know who or why. I tell myself we were lucky to escape. But deep down, I can't stop wondering what would have happened if we hadn't woken up at all. Story 2. Being tailed on a country road, Alabama, Georgia. Georgia. I still remember that night like it happened yesterday. I had just wrapped up a long business trip in Denver, and instead of waiting until morning, I decided to make the drive home on. It was late. The kind of late where the streets are empty and silence hangs heavy over everything. My route took me across the mountains of Colorado, a stretch of road I'd driven before, but never at night. In daylight, those mountains looked beautiful, the kind of scenery you'd stop and take pictures of. But after dark, it's a completely different world. Miles of winding asphalt carved into cliffs, shadows swallowing the edges, and nothing but thick forest pressing in on both sides. For the first hour, it was uneventful. Just me, my headlights, and the hum of the engine carrying me through the silence. The radio barely came through in those mountains, so I played music off my phone to fill the emptiness. It worked for a while, until I noticed something unusual. It started with headlights. At first, I thought nothing of it. Cars pass through even the most remote places. But this one was different. In my rear-view mirror, I could make out the outline of an old white pickup truck, the kind you'd expect to see hauling equipment or maybe parked outside a farm. Its paint looked weathered, the grille dented, and even from a distance I could see the way its headlights wavered slightly, like one was misaligned. At first, I told myself not to be paranoid, but the longer it stayed behind me, the more I began to pay attention. No matter how I adjusted my speed, it matched me. When I pressed harder on the gas and took the curves faster than I normally would, the truck followed with ease. And when I slowed to nearly a crawl, pretending I was lost, it slowed too, never closing the distance, never falling back, just hovering 6 or 7 car lengths behind. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they lived somewhere along this road. Maybe they were nervous about passing on the narrow lanes. But every explanation I came up with fell apart the moment I tested it. I even nudged my car slightly to the side a couple times, giving plenty of room for them to overtake me. Nothing. They just stayed where they were, steady as a shadow. The unease that had started as a whisper in my mind grew louder with each mile. My hands gripped the wheel tighter. My heartbeat quickened, and I could feel the adrenaline building. I reminded myself over and over that fear could exaggerate things, time 0.65s, that maybe I was seeing patterns where none existed. But then the road curved, and I spotted a narrow side path, one of those barely paved roads leading down into a small valley. Without thinking, I turned sharply, hoping the sudden move would throw them off. My hope lasted about 10 seconds. In the rearview mirror, the white truck swung into the same turn, its headlights bouncing off the trees. That's when the truth hit me like a cold wave. This wasn't coincidence. They were following me, and they weren't trying to hide it anymore. The realization made my body react before my mind could catch up. My chest tightened, my breathing quickened, and my hands trembled against the steering wheel. Every nerve screamed at me to get away. But out there, on a deserted mountain road, in the dead of night, time 12:65. There was nowhere to run. I tried to convince myself that maybe it was harmless, but deep down, I knew better. People don't follow strangers onto roads that lead nowhere unless they have a reason. With every passing minute, the situation felt more dangerous. The darkness pressed in on all sides, my headlights barely cutting through it. My car, an older mode, time .65s, didn't feel fast enough, didn't feel strong enough to keep me safe. And yet, I kept driving, hoping for a gas station, a diner, any place with light and people. My mind played through worst-case scenarios on a loop. What if they forced me off the road? What if my car broke down right there in the wilderness? That night taught me something I never forgot. True fear doesn't come from horror movies or ghost stories. It comes from the unknown, from realizing that someone has chosen you, specifically you, to follow in the dark, and you have no idea what they want. The truck never passed me, never honked, never made a move. But its silence was louder than any threat. It made every hair on my body stand on end. I gripped the wheel tighter and prayed that somewhere ahead, there would be a light cutting through the darkness, some reminder that I wasn't completely alone on that road. And as the truck's headlights glared in my rear view, I couldn't help but think, whatever was waiting in that white pickup, it wasn't good. As the minutes dragged on, the tension inside my car kept climbing. And that's when another problem made itself known. The low fuel chime echoed through the silence. That dreaded little sound that feels harmless in the city, but terrifying in the mountains. I glanced at the gauge and felt my stomach drop. The needle hovered just above empty. My heart sank because I knew what that meant. My time was running out, and I had no idea how much further I had to go. Panic clawed at the edges of my mind. If my car stalled on that dark mountain road, with no phone signal and a suspicious truck shadowing my every move, the outcome seemed obvious and grim. I forced myself to breathe slowly, telling myself I had to stay calm, that panicking would only cloud my judgment. Every mile, I scanned desperately for any sign of light, any hint of a town, a diner, or a station. The forest stretched endlessly, the darkness swallowing the road whole, and the only constant was the steady glow of those two headlights following close behind. Then, as if by some miracle, I caught sight of something in the distance. A faint glow, almost too dim to notice at first, broke through the tree line. I squinted, and as I rounded another curve, the shape became clearer. A truck stop, one of those 24-hour roadside stations that catered to long-haul drivers. It looked small, almost run down, but in that moment, it was the most beautiful sight I'd ever seen. I didn't hesitate. I took the turn into the lot faster than I should have, tires crunching against the gravel as I swung the wheel hard and pulled in close to the building. My hands shook as I yanked the keys from the ignition, and without even shutting the door, I bolted toward the entrance. The bell above the glass door jingled as I rushed inside, the fluorescent lights washing over me like a lifeline. From behind the counter, a tired-looking clerk lifted his head, clearly startled by my entrance. I must have looked wild, hair disheveled, breathing heavy, eyes darting toward the window. And that's when I saw it, the white truck. It had slowed at the edge of the lot, its headlights still cutting through the dark. For a few long, suffocating moments, it sat there. The engine idled, the faint hum carrying across the gravel lot, while I stood frozen just inside the station, praying the driver wouldn't step out. I counted the seconds in my head. 5, 10, 15. My pulse roared in my ears, my legs ready to collapse. The truck didn't move closer, didn't retreat, just lingered like it was deciding whether the chase was over. And then, without warning, it revved its engine, swung around, and disappeared back down the road we had come from, time 0.95s. Just like that, it was gone. The silence that followed was deafening. My knees nearly gave out from the rush of adrenaline draining from my system. The clerk asked me if I was okay, and I forced a shaky laugh, pretending it was just road fatigue. But inside, I knew the truth. Someone had been following me, and whoever they were, their intentions hadn't been innocent. In the days that followed, I tried to push it out of my mind. I told myself maybe it was nothing. Maybe my fear had exaggerated the situation. But deep down, I couldn't shake the image of that truck idling just outside, the unseen driver watching, weighing whether to take the next step. And then, a few nights later, the news confirmed everything I had feared. A local broadcast reported that authorities were searching for a group of criminals believed to be traveling through the region in an old white pickup truck. They were suspected of armed robbery, kidnapping attempts, and targeting travelers on rural mountain roads. When the blurry photo of the vehicle flashed across the screen, my breath caught in my throat. It was the same truck, the same dented grille, the same misaligned headlight. A chill ran through me as I sat there, realizing how close I had come to becoming one of their victims. If my gas had run out a few minutes earlier, if that truck stop hadn't appeared when it did, I might not be here to tell this story. To this day, I can't drive through the mountains at night without feeling that same cold knot in my stomach. And sometime, time 0.65s. When I glance in my rearview mirror and catch headlights trailing me, I wonder, what if next time there isn't a gas station waiting just around the bend?